Amanda thought her 30-year marriage to Daniel was built on trust and love. Until one afternoon, when an old letter hidden in the attic shattered everything she knew about her husband. As she uncovered the truth of his secret affair, Amanda found herself questioning not just Daniel's loyalty, but the very foundation of their life together. What would she do when the man she devoted her life to had been living a lie for years? Amanda and Daniel had built a life together that most people would envy. Married for 30 years, they had created a home filled with memories, laughter, and a sense of shared purpose. Their 2 children, now grown, were the result of countless years of love and sacrifice. Their marriage seemed like a perfect picture to the outside world, and even to Amanda, everything felt solid. They had their routines, dinners at the same time every evening, quiet weekends spent gardening in the yard, and evenings curled up on the couch watching old movies. There was a deep trust between them, one that had weathered the ups and downs of life. Amanda had never suspected that anything could be amiss in their relationship. Daniel was always attentive, always there when she needed him, whether it was a shoulder to lean on after a rough day, or a partner to share the joy of life's simple pleasures. They had shared so many milestones, graduations, vacations, family gatherings, that the thought of betrayal had never even crossed her mind. She never had to wonder where he was or who he was with. There was no reason to. But everything changed on a typical Wednesday afternoon in late October. It was a day like any other, except that Amanda decided to finally tackle the attic. Over the years, it had become a dusty, forgotten space, filled with boxes of old clothes, holiday decorations, and forgotten trinkets from their past. As she moved items around, Amanda noticed a small box tucked away in the corner, almost as if it were hidden deliberately. It was an old, leather-bound box with a clasp that had long since lost its shine. Curious, she opened it, expecting to find something trivial. But inside, tucked between yellowed letters and faded photographs, was an envelope marked private. Her heart skipped a beat, and a strange sense of unease settled over her as she pulled it out. It was addressed to someone, but not to her. The handwriting on the envelope was unfamiliar, neat, but not her husband's. She opened it cautiously, half expecting it to be some forgotten note or business correspondence. Instead, the words inside the envelope sent a shock through her entire body. The letter was from a woman named Victoria Thompson. Amanda had never heard that name before, and as she read the letter, her chest tightened. It was a personal letter, full of affection, recounting moments the 2 of them had shared, moments that Amanda had never known about. It spoke of private trips they had taken, intimate memories, and plans to meet again. The more Amanda read, the more she felt the world around her begin to spin. She wasn't just reading a letter from an old friend of Daniel's. She was reading a love letter. A letter from a woman who had been in her husband's life for years. At first, Amanda couldn't believe it. She wanted to dismiss it as some kind of misunderstanding, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized the pieces of the puzzle weren't fitting together. Daniel had always been distant in certain ways. There had been times when he seemed distracted, or when his late nights at work didn't seem to add up. But she had never suspected infidelity. Why would she? He was her partner, the father of her children, the man who promised to spend his life with her. Still in disbelief, Amanda placed the letter back in the envelope and sat in silence for what felt like hours. Her mind raced. How could Daniel keep something like this hidden for so long? And who was Victoria? Why had she been hiding in the shadows of their life together? For the first time in decades, Amanda felt the heavy weight of uncertainty pressing down on her, suffocating her in a way she had never known before. This one discovery had turned her entire world upside down. The woman she had trusted most, the man who had stood by her side for 3 decades, was now a stranger. Her marriage, which had once seemed so perfect, was now built on a foundation of lies. She didn't know what to do next. But she knew one thing for sure. Everything was about to change. Amanda spent the next few days in a haze, her mind reeling from the discovery. Every moment felt like an overwhelming blur of confusion and disbelief. She couldn't bring herself to confront Daniel just yet. She needed to understand more, to find more proof, to piece together the story he had kept hidden from her for so long. The letter was just the beginning, but it was all she had to go on. The more Amanda thought about it, the more she realized that she had been blind to the signs. There had been moments in their marriage when she had sensed something was off, but she had brushed them aside, convincing herself that everything was fine. Daniel was always so busy with work, often coming home late, but it never raised suspicions. He had always been a dedicated provider, someone who took pride in his career. But now those late nights, those unexplained absences, seemed to take on a new meaning. She began to question everything. Those small moments when he seemed distracted, the times he would disappear for a few hours without explanation. Amanda started to search through their shared belongings, not knowing exactly what she was looking for, but desperate to find anything that would help her understand what had been going on. She opened drawers, flipped through old journals, and went through their phone records. It felt like invading his privacy, but she was driven by an unbearable need for answers. What she found in the process only deepened the pit of dread in her stomach. There were small, seemingly insignificant things that now seemed far more important. A receipt for a bouquet of flowers that she had never received. A hotel reservation in a city they had never planned to visit. Her heart raced as she examined the details. Dates that did not align with any of their shared plans. The more she uncovered, the more the evidence began to stack up. Each piece was a confirmation that her marriage, the life she had built with Daniel, was built on lies. Her mind kept going back to the name Victoria Thompson. She had to know more about her. It felt like the key to understanding everything. Amanda wasn't sure where to start, but she knew one thing. She had to find out who this woman was, how long she had been in Daniel's life, and what her role was in their secret relationship. After some searching online, Amanda found several social media profiles for a woman named Victoria Thompson. At first glance, she seemed like just another woman in her 30s with an unremarkable job and an average life. But the more Amanda dug, the more she saw glimpses of a different life, a life that Daniel was clearly a part of. There were photos of them together, pictures of a weekend getaway, smiling faces, and intimate moments that Amanda had never known about. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. Victoria wasn't just a casual fling. This was a serious relationship, one that had been going on for years. The worst part was that Daniel had never once mentioned Victoria. There had been no sign, no indication that his feelings for this woman had ever crossed into the realm of something real. Amanda wondered how he could have kept such a big part of his life hidden from her for so long. She felt both betrayed and foolish. How could she have been so blind to the truth? The more Amanda discovered, the more the picture became clear. Daniel wasn't just lying to her, he was living a double life. He had two families, the one he had built with Amanda and the one with Victoria. His words of love, his promises, his devotion. None of it had ever been entirely true. She had been part of a facade, and the pain of that realization was like a weight on her chest. Amanda felt her heart breaking with each new discovery, each new detail she uncovered. She wanted to confront Daniel, to demand answers, but something inside her knew she needed to understand everything before she did. She couldn't face him with only half of the story. She had to know who Victoria was, how deep this deception went, and whether her entire life had been a lie. And so, Amanda continued her search, knowing that the truth she was uncovering would change everything. But she wasn't ready for the bombshell that would come next. The weight of the truth hung heavily over Amanda. The more she uncovered, the more she realized how deep the deception ran. It wasn't just a one-time mistake. It was an ongoing affair, one that spanned years. Each new detail felt like a gut punch, a betrayal that she hadn't been prepared for. She couldn't just ignore it anymore. She couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when, in reality, her marriage had been a lie. Amanda needed answers. The logical next step was to confront Daniel, but she wasn't ready to face him just yet. She had to be certain to have all the pieces of the puzzle in place. She couldn't afford to be wrong. And deep down, she knew that confronting him without understanding the full scope of his secret life would only lead to more pain. She needed to know who Victoria was, how long the affair had been going on, and if Daniel truly intended to continue this double life. With her mind set on finding the truth, Amanda made a bold decision. She would follow Daniel on one of his routine business trips. It wasn't something she had ever considered doing before. She had always trusted him to be where he said he would be, doing what he said he would do. But now all that trust felt like a distant memory, a naive assumption she could no longer afford. She had to see it with her own eyes. A few days later, Daniel mentioned a business trip to another city. He casually mentioned it over breakfast, not realizing that Amanda was already planning her next move. He talked about the meetings, the tight schedule, and the long hours. Amanda pretended to be supportive, nodding along, even managing a small smile as he talked about his upcoming work trip. She told him to have a good time, not revealing the storm that was brewing inside her. That afternoon, she booked a hotel room in the same city, choosing a place close to Daniel's. She didn't want to risk missing him, so she made sure to book a room nearby. She didn't know what she expected to find, but the compulsion to follow through on her suspicions was overwhelming. For the first time in years, she felt the cold grip of doubt, and she wasn't ready to let go of it until she had answers. Amanda arrived at the hotel just as evening began to fall. She told herself she would just wait, that she wasn't going to do anything rash. She would observe from a distance, keep her distance, and watch for any signs that would confirm her suspicions. As night settled in, she sat in her room, anxiously glancing out the window at the hotel's main entrance. Time seemed to stretch on, each minute feeling like an eternity. Finally, as the evening wore on, Amanda saw him. Daniel. He was walking toward the hotel with a woman. It was Victoria. There was no doubt about it. The woman Amanda had seen in the photos and online profiles. They were walking closely together, laughing, talking, clearly comfortable in each other's company. Amanda's heart pounded in her chest, a wave of nausea washing over her as she watched them. They entered the hotel together, disappearing behind the doors. Amanda couldn't move. She just stared, rooted to the spot, as the realization hit her like a tidal wave. The man she had loved for 30 years, the man she had trusted implicitly, was in love with someone else. And not just anyone, someone she had never known about, someone who had been there all along, hidden in the shadows of their life. Amanda stayed in her room, unable to sleep, her mind racing. She knew what she had seen, but part of her still wanted to deny it. She wanted to believe it wasn't true, that she had misunderstood the situation. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that she had just witnessed the final, undeniable proof of Daniel's betrayal. The next morning, she checked out of the hotel, her heart heavy with the truth she didn't want to face. She had seen what she needed to see. There was no more room for doubt. Daniel was having an affair, and it had been going on for far longer than she had ever imagined. The life they had built, the life she had trusted, was not what she thought it was. It was broken, built on lies, and the foundation was crumbling beneath her. The hardest part was still ahead. She knew she couldn't keep pretending everything was normal. She had to confront him. but part of her wondered if she could ever look at him the same way again. What would happen to their marriage now? Would he even try to make things right? Or was the love they had shared for 3 decades simply a shadow of the life he had been living behind her back? The questions flooded her mind as she drove back home, unsure of what awaited her when Daniel returned. The moment Daniel returned from his business trip, everything felt different. Amanda had spent the entire day in a quiet storm of emotions, processing the truth she had witnessed, the truth that shattered the life she had known. She was numb, yet the sharp edge of anger and betrayal gnawed at her insides. She couldn't wait any longer. She had to confront him. She couldn't allow this secret to fester any longer in the dark corners of their marriage. The truth had to be spoken, and she had to hear it from him. When Daniel walked through the front door, his usual smile faded as soon as he saw the look in Amanda's eyes. She wasn't pretending anymore. The warm greeting he expected wasn't there, and the tension between them hung heavy in the air. He dropped his suitcase by the door and stood there, his face shifting from confusion to apprehension. The familiar comfort of their home suddenly felt cold and unfamiliar. Amanda didn't wait for him to settle in or to explain his day. She didn't want the pleasantries or the distractions. Her voice was calm, steady, but it carried the weight of everything she had discovered in the past few days. "I know about Victoria," she said, her words cutting through the silence like a knife. Daniel froze, his face drained of color, and for a moment he seemed to lose his ability to speak. Amanda didn't give him the chance to deflect or deny. She had seen enough, and now it was time to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. She pulled the letter from the box in the attic from her bag and held it up, watching his reaction. At first, Daniel stammered, his words tumbling out in a jumbled mess of excuses. He denied, he apologized, he promised it had meant nothing. But Amanda wasn't fooled. She had already seen the evidence. She had seen the way he had looked at her in the hotel, the way they had walked into that building together. His words now felt hollow, distant, like the empty promises of a man who had been living a lie for far too long. "I didn't want to hurt you," Daniel eventually admitted, his voice softer now. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." Amanda's heart sank. He wasn't sorry for what he had done to her. He was sorry that he had been caught. She had known him long enough to recognize that. It wasn't the first time she had seen this side of him, his charm, his ability to manipulate his way out of uncomfortable situations. But this time it felt different. The years of trust, the moments of intimacy, the years of shared memories were now tainted by the lies he had told her. "How long?" Amanda's voice was barely a whisper. She didn't want to know the answer, but she had to ask. It was a question that had been gnawing at her since she first uncovered the truth. 7 years, Daniel confessed, his head hanging low. It started casually, but it grew into something more. "I didn't mean for it to happen this way. I never wanted to hurt you." 7 years. Amanda's mind raced as she processed the enormity of that admission. 7 years of her life, her trust, her love, had been betrayed. Daniel wasn't just someone who had made a mistake. He had been living a double life. The life she thought they shared had been a facade. There was a long silence between them. The weight of his confession settled between them, and Amanda felt the floor beneath her feet tremble. She wasn't sure what she expected from him, but she knew what she didn't want to hear anymore. More excuses. She had been his partner for 3 decades, and he owed her more than just words. He owed her the truth. "Why didn't you just tell me?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of sadness and anger. "Why keep this from me? All this time?" Daniel took a deep breath, clearly struggling with his emotions. "I was afraid," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to lose you. I thought I could keep it separate, that it wouldn't affect our life together." Amanda shook her head, unable to comprehend the depth of his reasoning. "You think keeping this secret was easier than telling me the truth? That it wouldn't affect our life? You've destroyed everything we built." The words hit him like a slap, and for a moment he didn't know how to respond. His silence told Amanda everything she needed to know. This wasn't about love. It was about fear, about his own inability to face the consequences of his actions. Amanda took a step back, her heart breaking all over again. She had loved this man for 30 years, but the man standing before her was a stranger, a man who had spent more time deceiving her than loving her. The realization was almost too much to bear. There was no coming back from this, no patching up the damage. "I don't know what to do with this," she said, her voice cracking as she fought to hold back tears. "I don't even know who you are anymore." Daniel took a step forward, but Amanda held up her hand to stop him. She needed space. Time to process everything he had just told her. The world she had known had crumbled in an instant, and now she was left standing among the ruins, unsure of where to go next. As the silence stretched on, Amanda realized that this was the end, not just of their marriage but of the life she thought she had known. The days that followed the confrontation were a blur of emotion and confusion. Amanda felt like she was moving through life in a fog, each step heavy, each decision fraught with uncertainty. The house, once a place of comfort and shared memories, now felt like a prison. Every corner, every room reminded her of the life she had thought was secure, the life that had now been ripped apart. Daniel had moved out, taking only a few belongings, leaving Amanda to process the aftermath of everything that had transpired. There were no more late-night talks, no more casual evenings on the couch. There was only silence. For the first time in years, Amanda felt completely alone. She had spent 3 decades of her life with Daniel, raising children, building a home, creating a world that revolved around their shared love and commitment. Now, it felt like it had all been for nothing. She had been betrayed by the one person she trusted most. The pain was almost unbearable, a weight she couldn't seem to shake. The divorce papers arrived 2 weeks after Daniel left. Amanda had always imagined this part of her life would come much later, if at all. She had never envisioned her marriage ending this way. But as the days passed, she realized that there was no other choice. The betrayal was too great. The trust was broken beyond repair. The life they had built together was irrevocably shattered. She signed the papers, her hand shaking as she did so. It felt like another piece of herself was slipping away. But it was the only way forward. Throughout the process, Daniel remained distant, his apologies no longer convincing. He had begged her for forgiveness when he left, telling her that he wanted to work things out, that he loved her and made a terrible mistake. But his words rang hollow. Amanda knew that the man he was now was not the man she had married. He was someone who had hidden behind lies for too long, and no amount of remorse could undo the damage. She had once believed that love could overcome anything, but now she understood that some wounds were too deep to heal. As the weeks went by, Amanda began to focus on herself. For the first time in years, she had space. Space to think, to breathe, to process everything that had happened. She began to rediscover parts of herself that had been buried under the weight of marriage and motherhood. She reconnected with friends she hadn't seen in years, took up hobbies she had long abandoned, and started taking care of herself in ways she hadn't allowed herself to before. She knew she couldn't erase the past, but she could begin to rebuild, to create a new life for herself. Slowly, the fog of betrayal started to lift, and she found clarity in the midst of the pain. There were moments when she was overwhelmed by doubt. She questioned if she had made the right decision, if she was strong enough to move on. She thought about the life she had with Daniel, the years they spent together, and wondered if there was a way to forgive him. But every time she thought about his betrayal, the way he had hidden his life from her, the lies he had told, the pain came rushing back. There was no going back, no fixing what had been broken. In time, Amanda realized that the most important thing wasn't whether or not she could forgive Daniel. The most important thing was learning to forgive herself. She had been blind to the signs, yes, but she hadn't deserved the lies. She had given everything to their marriage, and she deserved better than the deceit he had offered her. It took time, but she finally came to understand that she had done nothing wrong. She had loved with all her heart. And it wasn't her fault that Daniel had chosen to betray that love. Months later, Amanda received a message from Victoria. The woman who had been at the center of her heartbreak reached out, apologizing for the pain she had caused. Victoria claimed that she had never wanted to hurt Amanda, that she had been manipulated just as much as Amanda had been. Part of Amanda wanted to respond, to ask questions, to hear Victoria's side of the story, but she chose not to. It wasn't about Victoria anymore. It was about Amanda, about her own healing. She didn't need answers from someone else to move forward. In the end, Amanda found peace in her decision to walk away. She knew she could never forget what Daniel had done, but she also knew that she had the strength to rebuild. She began to reclaim her life, not defined by betrayal, but by resilience. And while she would never be the same, she realized that the woman she was becoming, stronger, more self-aware and independent, was the woman she was always meant to be. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but Amanda had learned that the most important part of life was not avoiding pain, but how you choose to rise from it.